Hello and welcome to episode 9 of On the Bench. If you build aircraft, ships, armour, automotive, science fiction, figures, or space, this is the podcast for you. In this episode, we're going to be talking about modelling paints. We're also going to be having a look at weathering aircraft, how to do it, and some of the best techniques. And also we'll be having our usual segment on what's new in the modelling world. On the Bench is available on iTunes, and now we're also available on Stitcher. So go right ahead to your favourite podcast app and mark us down as your favourite so you don't miss any episodes. And hello and welcome to everybody. And with me we have Ian.
Hi everyone.
And we have a special co-host today, Chris. G'day Chris, how you going?
Hi Dave. First of all, I'd like to thank both of you, both Ian and Dave, for inviting me on.
No
worries, mate.
So today is the 11th of November as we record this.
Yep.
So commemoration of the Great War and all the sacrifices out there. So 1917, 100 years later.
Yep.
Still
haven't learnt our lessons.
Still haven't learned our lessons, unfortunately. Still continue on. But so a lot of celebrations, of course, going around the world at the moment for the 11th of November. And also kicking off this weekend is the IPMS UK big show at Telford.
Telford, yes.
Which I'm hanging to get over to one year.
Yeah, who isn't?
Absolutely awesome.
Who isn't?
So, Chris, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Been modelling for most of my life.
Yeah.
If you want to go right back to the very start.
Started with Airfix kits, no doubt.
Indeed. My first Airfix kit was in 1973, and that was a British Harrier. Got it from Santa, and both from father and I built that until it disintegrated after me playing with it for a few months. So that's where it all started. After that, my first kit that actually painted was another Airfix, and that was a Swordfish in 72 scale. My mother painted the wheels for me because I just didn't have a steady hand, and she also made me mix those paints very, very well, which was, for a young kid, was a bit tedious. And then Ian came along. I've known Ian for many years, and he introduced me to Hasegawa, and haven't looked back. I don't think I've actually bought an Airfix kit since, but one of these days I will jump in again and get another one.
Well, since their quality's so much better now.
So what genre do you mainly build in?
Aircraft. 48 scale is preferred. I like World War II, Luftwaffe stuff, and also Russian 50s and 60s sort of genre as well. So a lot of the Russian stuff that I like is larger bombers, so I'm just starting to get into those at the moment. So they've got to be 72 scale. And with the World War II stuff, which I build, it's 48 scale.
And of course, our program's called On the Bench, so we always ask our new guests, what's on your bench at the moment?
Rightio. I'm actually building two kits at the moment for our club display for DSMC. One is a SAM missile. That's going to be painted in the Egyptian colours. And I'm also doing actually getting back to it, an old 72 scale Hasegawa MiG-29, which I started in Ian's shed about 27 years ago. I put it in one piece. It was in one piece. It was I did a good job of it, actually. I was quite surprised. The finish of it was quite good to actually pull it out of the box again and say, right, I'm going to jump into this thing again. I'm going to finish it.
So, wait, you started this kit 20 years ago?
27.
27 years ago. So it's definitely a very mature shelf queen then.
Yeah.
Well, it was kept in the box, and I move house pretty well, and I keep things in pretty good shape. So it's survived, apart from losing just a couple of minor pieces, which has been pretty good. But it wasn't damaged in any way, so that was good. So I've pulled it out just recently and decided to put different markings on it this time. So I sanded back the original paint, which I painted back way back then with enamels. It's now acrylic, because I now work with acrylics. I pretty much got rid of the enamels. And it's now in Iranian markings. So I've just started to paint that, and I'll describe that a little bit further on when we start getting into the weathering.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks again for deciding to pop along today. So I think what we'll do now is we'll jump into our next segment, What's New, and there's a lot of stuff to get through, and there's something I know that Ian and I are both chafing at the bit to talk about, so we'll get right into that. So coming up next is What's New. And welcome back, and we're going to talk about what's new in the modelling world. First of all, the one that caught my eye, and I certainly know it's caught Ian's eye because he's actually made inquiries about it, is the HPH Models have announced they're doing a limited release of a B36 Peacemaker in 1/48 scale. I believe they're only making 100.
That is correct, yeah, only 100.
100 copies of this. And it's going to be an absolutely huge kit.
Well, 1.5 metre wingspan.
1.5 metre wingspan.
Yep.
And the cost, €575.
Yep.
Oh,
big money, mate.
Big money. The kit's going to be made out of resin, fiberglass, and of course the ubiquitous photo etch as well. And just looking at the HPH website, some of the pre-design pictures that they've got there, this thing's going to be huge.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, it's all going to be done in bare metal finish as well.
Yes. Well, I don't think they were ever painted.
No, I don't think they were. And, of course, you can see if you ever see the old movie Sack, I think it's called.
Strategic Air Command.
Strategic Air Command, that's right. And it's got a fantastic bit in it with the B-36 taking off. And that's absolutely fantastic. Where are you going to put it in?
I wouldn't even know where to put the box.
I mean, the wingspan is going to be, 1.5 metres?
Yeah. Who knows? But who cares?
Who cares, yeah. So that's a limited release. They're going to have a stall, I believe, at Telford
Yep.
this year, in which I'll be taking orders, or you can just go online and register your interest.
You pre-order and they'll have them ready for the customers at Telford. They can pick them up on the day.
Well, it's tomorrow.
Yep.
Wow. So you might have missed the boat, mate.
Oh, I don't think I'll be flogging off 100 in a couple of days, mate.
I don't know. There's a lot of people out there who'd be pretty keen to have one of these, I think, in their collection. I mean, it's just going to make a magnificent model. It's going to be absolutely stunning, and I'm really looking forward to seeing...
gone are the days when Monogram could say, we've got the biggest model kit.
Absolutely.
Which was a peacemaker as well.
All right, so what else have we got in what's new? Stalingrad kits have announced some, beg your pardon, Stalingrad miniatures have got some new figures in 3 different scales. They've got a set of figures of German rear echelon staff members, which would go well in like a Kumbelwagen setting or a staff car setting. They've also produced a package of 2 German motorcycle troops in 1941 in 1/35th scale. And also in 1/16th scale, they've done a German infantryman from the Großdeutschland division in 1943. As well as that, they have also produced a figure in 75 millimeters, so that's roughly about 1/24th scale, of the Princess Olga Konstantinova Olvana, which is the middle daughter, apparently, of Prince Constantine. And I believe they were using pictures from the Russian art gallery to actually make the model off. So this should make quite a nice little figure for those of you who enjoy doing figure building. From Italeri, for November 2017, they're going to be doing in 1/72nd scale a Kafar, which of course was the all-weather multi-role aircraft used by the Israeli Air Force. And that's actually going to come in 3 different types. You can actually, it's got decals for the US Marine Corps and also for the US Navy, because they actually leased them off the Israeli Air Force to use as aggressor aircraft back in the 80s, I think it was, mid-80s to late 80s. So that's going to make a wonderful little kit. For the car builders out there, they're doing a 1/12th scale Fiat F500F, 1968 model.
Nice.
My mum actually used to have one of them. I'm sure she did.
Did
Yeah, a little Fiat thing.
Who'd she cheese off?
I don't know. She probably upset my dad, and that's why he went and bought one for her. In 1/35th scale, they're going to be doing a 15cm Panzerwerfer 42 off SD KFZ, which look, this kit I reckon you could actually use is a like in a zombie apocalypse or something like that, because it just looks really retro and sort of heavily armoured up the way they've the way it looks, and it looks awesome. So this was used by the German Armed Forces during World War II with multiple rocket launchers on the back. Of course, the only problem with it, once you fired it, the counter battery fire sort of pretty much knew where you were straight away.
Exactly.
So, boom, straight back in on you. Also from Italeri, we've got a 1/72nd scale Eurofighter 2000. I think this is a 100th anniversary of the Gruppa Cassia Special Colours, which is the Italian Air Force. And you get 4 different choices in decals there. And it's quite a nice choice of decals, and it should make quite a striking aircraft once you've built that. Also from Italeri, they're doing a 1/72nd scale Farmhouse Battle American Civil War 1864 battle set. Now, I know Italeri used to do 1/72nd scale soft plastic figures quite a lot back in the 80s, I think even in the 70s, and have been still manufacturing them. This little set comes with a farmhouse and a barn, as well as a number of figures on the sprue for both the Confederates as well as the Union troops, which should make quite a nice little diorama. Also, for the truck builders out there, there is a Mercedes-Benz SK Eurocab 6x4. This is going to be in 1/24th scale. And looking at the pictures from the kit, it looks like it should be fairly straightforward with not too many issues. So that's it from Edaleri. And from Meng, we have the announcement of 2 new kits. And geez, Meng's really pumping them out lately. So they're going to be producing a 1/35th scale Israeli main battle tank Merkava Mark IV, which is going to come with the active trophy protection system, which I believe the US is actually looking at purchasing, I think, for their tanks. This is in 1/35th scale, as I said, with 950 parts, and certainly the Israel armour has been quite popular with a number of manufacturers lately.
Meng do a really nice job in their kits.
Yes.
Highly detailed, good price, really worth looking at.
They're also going to be producing an M911 Seahet, which is a heavy equipment semi-trailer, and that's in 1/35th scale also, 843 parts count. So that'd go really well with the Israeli tank, and certainly you can use it for a number of different dioramas. It would lend itself well. It would look really nice. Rolling on, Kitty Hawk, they're talking about, in fact they are going to be producing a Sikorsky HH60G Pavehawk in 1/35th scale. No news yet on the release date or the price. Kitty Hawk a bit hit and miss, aren't they?
From my understanding, they do a very good helicopter.
Yep.
For fixed-wing aircraft, jets and so forth. Not too good. They break down the fuselage too much. There's too much complication going on there. So, there's a few issues with some of their kits.
Plus, it's we'll leave it up to the modeller to fix the problems.
Yeah. Well, the Pavehawk is something that I know that a lot of people will find interested in actually purchasing, because it's not a kit that's actually produced at the moment. So hopefully we'll get to look at some more test shots later on and get some more news to you about when that's coming out. Hasegawa have announced some releases for December, so just in time for Christmas. They are going to be producing a helicopter destroyer, the DHH Kaga, which can carry up to 28 aircraft in 1/700th scale. Interestingly, this kit comes with F-35Bs in it as well. So maybe Hasegawa knows something about what Japan plans to do with their helicopter carriers into the future. Also, Subaru 360 1964 model, 1/24th scale. I think your mother would have to love this. It's just such an ugly looking car, but I'm sure the car guys out there will be super interested in this. They're also producing a Suzuki GT380B in 1/12th scale, so it's good to see something out there for the motorcycle builders. And 1/72nd scale Area 88J 35J Draken, which is I think it's with a comic book series, and that's why they're releasing it in those colours. Action-packed manga from Area 88, which I think hit the newsagents back in 1979. Last but not least, they're doing a 1/24th scale Mazda Cosmo Sport, which also comes with a girl figure in a limited edition. And, I beg your pardon, last but not least from Hasegawa, there's a Hitachi Vibrator Combined Roller, basically an old steam roller, but comes in 1/35th scale, and I'm sure that will have some appeal. And last but not least, for Ian, they are also producing a Focke-Wulf FW190D-9.
Long nose.
Long nose version, yep. And they're doing that in 1/32nd scale. So they're going to in the...
Pretty sure they've already got a 32nd scale D9.
Well, this is
so it's probably a
re-release.
Yeah, probably a re-release, different decals.
Yep. And I think the next one that they're talking about too here is the Sky Raider in 1/72nd scale. Is that just a reboxing?
It'd have to be.
I'm sure that's been done before.
Yeah, Sky Raiders, yeah.
Yeah. And lastly from Hasegawa, they're doing a Suzuki Jimmy, a little limited edition 1/24th scale 4x4 Suzuki that gets around. So that's it from Hasegawa. Last but not least, Revell from Germany have announced this month's new releases. Now, they've got an F14D Super Tomcat in 1/100th scale. I don't get that.
1/100th.
1/100th scale.
That's going back to the harking of the days when they build the scale to fit the box.
But, I mean, there's been a super huge interest in 1/144th scale aircraft now, which is really sort of booming at the moment. And these guys come out and bring out a 1/100th scale Super Tomcat. I don't get it. I don't understand who's driving it or what's going on over there in Revell, Germany.
Well, someone thought it was a good idea.
Well, somebody thought it was a good idea, but I just don't get it. It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, they're also doing a Porsche 911 Turbo in 1/25th scale. Of course, a classic Porsche 911. The plastic comes in 3 different types. You got a red sort of finish, a silver, and a bit of chrome in there. So I think that might need a bit of work putting that together, but I'm sure the car models will be able to cope with that quite well. They're also doing a T55AM/T55AM2B in 1/72nd scale. That looks like it make a nice little kit in 1/72nd scale. And they're doing a tractor, a Porsche Junior 108 tractor in 1/24th scale. For, tractor collecting is really big. It's a real big thing.
Yeah.
Guys go nuts over
their farm machinery.
Over farm machinery, but old tractors really love collecting that sort of stuff and get it running, and they have all sorts of meats and everything. Also from Revell, Germany, we have a Trabant 601S. Do you know much about Trabants?
Chris loves them.
East German. You could pull the whole car apart, I believe, with a screwdriver and a spanner.
A flathead screwdriver and a 12mm spanner.
Well, this is going to be in 1/24th scale, and I hope... Oh, you know what? I shouldn't have let Chris come in here. He's probably going to catch the car bug from you, Ian. Ian's going nuts over cars.
He's already got
lately.
the car bug.
Oh, jeez. Looks like I'm getting outnumbered here. But this looks like a lovely little kit with some nice decals there. And it even comes with a starter paint kit and some glue and a paintbrush. All right, well, that's all I got, guys, from What's New. You guys got anything?
No. My big news was going to be the B36.
Yeah, B36. I'm hanging out to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
All right, I'll wait until get a phone call from you saying you've purchased it. We'll do a inbox review.
Yeah,
you can bring it along.
Yeah, bring it along, yeah.
And we'll have to
hire a trailer to put the box in.
I'll have to get a bigger studio.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so that's it from What's New. Again, if you're a kit manufacturer out there, or you've got some stuff you want us to have a look at in particular, drop us a line to our email address onthebench64@gmail.com, and we'll do our best endeavour to have a look at what you want us to have a look at. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about paints, just have a general conversation about paints, and then that'll lead us into our second little discussion we're going to have today about aircraft weathering. And welcome back, and we're going to be having a bit of a chat about paints and to use in your modelling every day building. Of course, when I first started modelling, I'm pretty sure you guys are the same. The only real choices you had were Humbrol and maybe
Revell
or Testers. I think.
Testers, yes,
Yeah.
in the little glass bottles.
Yeah, and of course they were enamels, weren't they?
Yep.
Nothing but enamels.
Yep.
Gee, things have moved on since then, haven't they?
Indeed. A lot more water base out there now, which is a lot better for the modeller, and it's a much better situation. And there's a lot more choice out there, which is really, really good.
Well, really, the acrylics sort of revolutionised, in my opinion, the paints, the acrylics and the lacquers.
Yep.
And it's just been an explosion of manufacturers in recent years. I mean, look at, what's his name? The Mig.
Mig's got his own paint range.
His own paint range now. Model Air.
Vallejo.
SMS. Citadel paint ranges.
Yep. For the automotive people, you've got Gravity paints.
Yes.
And Zero paints, which do a lot of the proper automotive colours.
Yep.
pre-mixed for
Pre-mixed, yep. With
model.
and the metallics apparently are done with very finely ground metallic particles, so you get the good scale effect.
So let's have a chat first of all about enamels. And so enamels, although they're still popular with some, I think they're starting to sort of
their days are waning.
Yeah, the days are numbered for sure. And of course, you've got all the mucking around with enamels as well, and you've got the issue of it drying out
And the smell.
And if you paint indoors like I do, even though I use a paint booth, using enamels indoor doesn't endear yourself to the significant other, does it?
No. No.
Yeah, the acrylics nowadays are so much better, and the range is there as well. And you got the choice. Me personally, I like Guns paints, and I've invested a lot of it into Guns.
Same. Mind you, I'm very disappointed lately, and I think there's a lot of modelers out there probably having the same issue with their flat clear. Which is, I've spoken to a few modelers, and I've found it myself, you start spraying, it leaves white spots behind.
Oh, really?
It's very interesting you
It's
mention
like
that.
it goes off. You use it the first time you use it, it's fine. You put the bottle aside, you use it a couple of weeks later, and you start spraying your flat clear, and all of a sudden, you lose all white spots everywhere.
You get bad batches of paints. All paint manufacturers have some sort of bad batches every now and then, but it comes down to their own quality checking, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Or lack of.
Yeah, lack of quality control.
Or lack of quality control.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think for me, the thing that really sort of revolutionised everything for me was the straight out of the bottle, pour it straight into the into your airbrush and just go.
Yeah.
You didn't have to worry about thinning it or mixing it or anything like that. And that's been an actually huge boon, I think. And, I mean, even to the point now where paint manufacturers will just sell paints for a particular camouflage design, like RAF 1940, for example.
Yes.
And you get, a little sort of box of about 4 to 5 paints and bang, off you go. I think Life Colour was one that started that.
If you like live colour paints, myself, I'm not a fan.
I don't have issue with Life
I
Colour.
can't. It's like spraying sand, mate.
No, this is an interesting little sort of subject because I found that when I used Life Colour, I had to make sure I was using the Life Colour thinners as well. If I tried to use a different type of thinner...
I'd just coagulate.
I'd get sort of issues like you're talking about, like it comes out like, fine grains of sand and all that type of stuff.
And that was even with me using their...
Oh, really?
Thinners. Yeah, I hated it. I gave it all away.
No, I don't mind at all.
Take it off my hands. I don't want this crap anymore.
That's interesting you mention that because a lot of modelers have personal preference.
Yep.
Because some modelers purely like doing enamels, and you got the Life Colour issue here, and some people don't even like Guns. I love Guns.
Yeah.
It depends on how you paint and what you're doing. The particular modeler, I suppose.
Yeah, and Guns has recently released I think another 10 colours, which look a lot like there's a few colours in there that look like they might be useful for someone's doing wingnut kits.
Mm.
Good. But if you do wingnut kits, you really can't go past drooling bulldog paints.
Mm. Never used it.
They're from, I think, Belgium.
Yeah.
They're from, and they're actually using the proper paint schemes, the proper paint codes, and so you can get your PC10s and your different reds.
Didn't the Germans use lacquers?
Yeah, and they are a lacquer.
Yeah, so
when you put their paint like their red over the top of a bare metal cowl, it comes up like candy apple.
Oh,
Which is, then you think about it, these aircraft back in the day
yeah.
would have been really striking, some of the paint jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
And being a lacquer, a lot of the wood grain and fabric surfaces sort of shown through as
Correct,
well.
yeah.
It's regarding that sort of item. I'm going off the track here a little bit, but talking about lozenge camouflage, and with the New Zealand fellas when they were restoring or building from new, but the old aircraft from World War One.
Yep.
What they were doing with the lozenge camouflage was basically hand painting it, and they were getting a good result, and that was all fine. But then they started to screen print it because lozenge was originally screen printed.
Okay.
So first off, they started with the wing, and they would put the covering over the wing. Then they would paint it by hand. Then they started going back to the original way of doing it properly, which was the fabric, and then they would screen print it and then attach it to the wing. And by doing that, they actually found out the lozenge made the fabric stronger, and it was able to flex but also strength.
Yep.
So they found out their aircraft was actually flexing and being stronger and working better in the air. And they were blown away by their going back to the old ways of doing things. And that's what they're doing with the New Zealand aircraft manufacturing, with these old World War I aircraft.
So when I was first doing modelling, of course, I had the enamels, but then I started using Tamiya paint as I sort of managed to get more pocket money as I was getting older and older, and Tamiya was sort of the mainstay for me for many, many years.
Right, yep.
And, you know, Tamiya used to produce a huge different range of colours and everything, and still today, if I open up my my little paint sort of store, there's lots of Tamiya paint still in there, and they still function quite well and do a great job.
I used I got a couple of Tamiya paints myself, and they're actually really good in their matte range. I don't have the gloss range per se, but I've got them in the matte range. So if I want to paint an acrylic paint on a armour vehicle or aircraft that I want matte, and I don't want to put a matte finish over the top, I just pull out some of the paints I've got sitting there, and they work beautifully. They really do.
I guess we're missing sort of the big elephant in the room when we're talking about paints is what goes underneath it. And I know Ian and I have sort of circled around this discussion before about whether to
undercoat
to do undercoat or not. I'm one who does like to undercoat, and
very rarely.
And I can't beat the old Tamiya rattle can undercoat or what's the other one? The Guns, not the Guns. It's like a microfiller one. You get it in 1,000 or 500.
Yeah, the Guns.
The Guns one, yeah. And
Mr. Surfacer.
That's right, Mr. Surfacer. That's what I was trying to think of. Thanks. And I can't recall not having or using a undercoat at all when I'm doing a paint. With the exception, I think, I've tried, and I think you've done this too, Chris, some of the metal finishes. You haven't done an undercoat, you've just done straight onto the actual kit itself.
Oh, the Alclad.
Alclad, yeah.
Yeah, with the Alclad. I've done a couple of aircraft in the natural metal, and on a particular Alclad paint, which is, I think it's aluminium, I've painted directly onto the plastic. Make sure the plastic is cleaned down. So the aircraft is, because I've done 2 aircraft. I build them, I clean them up, make sure that they're spot on.
Highly polished, the material highly polished.
Well, I wouldn't polish the plastic. This is basically it's been glued, it's been finished, it's been filled. I would go over it with a little bit of sandpaper and just make sure that, number one, the surface is spot on perfect, because you're putting a silver finish over the top and it will show up any imperfections. So you've got to make sure that it is perfect. And then once you've gone over it, go over it again and make sure those areas are finished. Now, once that's been done, I would then wipe it down, clean it, get a sponge with a little bit of soapy water and just clean the surface, and then some glass cleaner little rags you get from the optometrist, and sort of just wipe over the kit and make sure it's really, really clean. And then I'll go start painting. Now, when I paint in levels and very small spurts of paint. So I might do a very, very small amount of paint on first and let it dry and let it bite in. And then once that's done, then start building up the coats. I've seen a lot of fellas do this a similar sort of finish, but they do a undercoat. And me personally, I think some of the undercoats are a little bit too heavy, and they can get rid of the finish underneath. And I'm actually working with the plastic, getting a finish through the paint. The plastic is actually coming through the paint. I'm actually working with the plastic as well.
Because for a long time, I mean, and even today, you'll see people talking about Alclad, and they'll say you have to have a gloss black put down first. So
for the chromes of that, of course you do, yeah.
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 You need something that's going to give that reflective surface.
Yeah, saying that, with my gloss colours, like the chromes, for undercarriage, I use their Alclad chrome. I hand paint or spray, airbrush, enamel black. I don't use their particular black. I just use a Humbrol.
I just use Guns.
Yep, that's fine. I just use a Humbrol enamel and then put the chrome on top. And that works nicely. But only on the chrome. I don't seem to do it on the other colours.
And the paint that I've recently come across, which I absolutely love, it just goes down so beautifully, is the Mr. Paint.
Right.
That comes in bottles that you can pour straight in, and it's ready to use and ready to go straight away. And it is a sensational little paint. Just comes straight out of the airbrush. It's really forgiving with your airbrush pressures as well. So if you get it down a little bit too low or a bit too high, it's not as sort of bad as, say, if you were using life colour, where that's really going to be zoned in and dialed right in at a particular pressure for that. But Mr. Paint just goes on beautifully, and it just dries so quickly, and it's a fantastic...
You usually just pour straight from the bottle into your cup, or you...
Yeah, straight from the bottle into the cup, and off you go.
Yeah, because I recently... I haven't got them yet. I ordered them. Bought 100 pipettes.
Oh, they're a godsend.
From China. 100.
They're an absolute godsend.
$1.05
Yep.
shipped.
Yep.
For 100 pipettes. So
Yep.
Yeah, well...
And with my pipettes, because they're so darn cheap now, I'll just use one pipette for a painting
colour,
session and just throw it away.
It out, yeah.
Yep.
That's what I'm planning on doing.
Yep.
No more having to wipe down the bottles and...
Or no more having to sort of gently pour out the paint into the cup of your airbrush.
Yep.
None of that sort of mucking around.
Getting away from that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do any of you guys still use enamels at all?
No.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Black enamel for underneath the chrome, but I'm pretty much moved away from it. So I've still got some the old Humbrol sitting there.
Mind you,
I
like you. Yeah, the only colours I use is their aluminium and the gunmetal.
Okay.
The polishable gunmetal, which I reckon is a great colour.
Yeah.
The polishable gunmetal from Humbrol. Otherwise, I stick with guns.
It's good paint. I also use, because I've still got the paints there and they're quite a few years old, I use them up on bases. So when I'm doing bases for the kits, some groundwork and things like that, so I just use the colours on that, make sure I use them all up.
I think I've got some specialist enamels, and I'm thinking there's a manufacturer, a cottage industry one that's specifically for Australian armour, and it's called Mouse House. You guys have probably heard of it, but I don't know whether our listeners have. But they did the three colours for the Ozcam camouflage, and they came out in enamel, and they were specifically paint matched, so you can get the right tones and everything for doing Australian armour. So I think that's about the only enamels I've got sort of sitting around in my room.
Yep.
I can't think of any others that I've got.
No, we've all progressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Citadel colours. Citadel for a long time obviously were used for the Warhammer stuff, and a lot. I think that's where the first sort of airbrush, air ready sort of stuff migrated from. Am I right there in saying that?
Well, could be.
I'm pretty sure.
Could be.
I don't know. No,
I know their regular paint you can't airbrush.
No.
It just dries straight away.
Yep.
As soon as it leaves the airbrush.
And that's another interesting aspect too. Some paints are readily sort of you can brush it, and other paints just don't like being brushed at all.
Yep.
Whereas some like being airbrushed, and other paints, you have awesome all sorts of.
Oh yeah. Well, I can testify. I can't hand paint bloody guns.
Yeah.
That stuff's impossible to hand paint.
Yeah. Although you got to say, is it designed to be hand painted or not?
No, it's airbrush paint.
It's an airbrush paint, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's what you buy your Vallejo's for. If
Yeah.
you want to hand paint, buy Vallejo.
Yep.
Yeah, and all Warhammer as well. Warhammer's a nice paint to hand paint because that's designed to be hand brushed as well.
And plus, I reckon the Citadel paints usually have the best metallics.
Absolutely. So, if any of you guys had any luck with lacquers, I know, Chris, you were talking about lacquers before in regards to painting sort of like World War I German aircraft. Have any of you guys actually used lacquers yet?
Oh, I've used lacquers a few times, not like large projects, but a few times. I haven't had a problem with them.
Yeah.
Except for the smell.
Me personally, I haven't used a lacquer as yet.
Yeah.
Once I start getting into some World War I aircraft, I might start investigating the lacquer.
Your Kara 61. That's L-clad.
Okay.
L-clad's a lacquer.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah. So you have used lacquers.
There we go.
And you got a good finish out of that too.
Storage of paints. How do we store our paints?
In, basically a little paint storage rack I bought.
Yeah.
Just something cheap from the $2 shop that you can fits me guns paints in. It's got 4 drawers and I just keep it in that.
So you're not worried about drying out or anything like that?
Yeah, I get a bit concerned about paints drying out.
Fridge then.
Yeah. I prefer to keep my paints in a timber box, which I got from a second-hand shop, and I went down to Bunnings and picked up some MDF and a drill bit, which was the same size as the Guns little jars, and then I drilled out 100 of these little holes, and then they.
She must have been a big drill bit.
Circle cutters.
Oh, circle cutters. Okay.
Yeah, so circle cutter, and cut them all out, and fits in there quite nicely. And being timber, it sort of keeps it the temperature down, and I try and keep that little box away from the sunlight and the through the window, so it keeps the paints in really good condition.
There's some little devices you can buy now, which you can strap the bottle down, and it's like a shaker.
Yes.
It does the shaking for you. And some paints will actually come with like a little ball bearing in it. So
yeah, I you can buy the ball bearings separate. I do that with all my Vallejo. I just bought a couple of bags of ball bearings.
Yeah.
And stuck a ball bearing in each pot.
Yep.
Helps with the mixing when you shake the crap out of it.
That's a really good idea, eh?
Yeah.
And I know you do the same thing with the Alclads as well. Yeah. It's a really good idea.
Put a ball in there, makes it mix a lot better and easier.
The other thing too that I find is quite helpful is nothing more frustrating. You spent $8 or something on a particular paint pot, and it's got it's a glass paint pot, and it'll have the plastic lid, and of course you get the paint drying on top. So what I find to do is if I get a little bit of Vaseline and just put it around the top, so that way when I screw down, the paint's not going to lock on it or bind. So it's much like when you put a oil filter in a car, you put a bit of oil around the ring there so you can get the oil filter on and off again quite easily. Because it's intensely frustrating when you go to open a paint jar and it's jammed, and the only way you can get it off is by brute force. And of course, you either break the glass jar, or you break more importantly, the plastic cap that goes on it. So I find just a little bit of Vaseline in there on the top, when you finish with it, and it just makes
Guns
sure.
bought out a tool for that. It's like a little cup you put your bottle in. You got like this big spannery thing you put over the top and unlocks it. Yeah, I bought one of them.
I will be getting one of those.
Very handy.
What I do with the Guns paints at the moment, I just get a very small flathead screwdriver and just sort of put it up into the gap and sort of just twist it a little bit, and then go around the other side and then twist that, and that sort of just jimmies it out, and then you just unscrew it yourself.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it for paints, and that leads us into our next segment, in which we're going to be talking about aircraft weathering, and of course, that's the whole reason why Chris is here. Yeah. So let's roll straight into that, and we'll be talking about aircraft weathering. And we're back having a discussion about aircraft weathering, and I know very little about aircraft weathering because I'm mainly a shipbuilder. Of course, no doubt some of the techniques can, be transferred across to other genres, but you two guys are sort of like the gurus in aircraft weathering, so take it away.
Go for it, Chris.
Okay,
that's what we got you here for, mate.
Okay, aircraft weathering. Before you start weathering in any sort of project, you really should check your references. Basically, most modelers pretty much know their subject anyway. Yeah. Or they might just pick up something and just go, well, I wouldn't mind building this. But the first thing you should do is check your references and really have a good look at the photos and how these things are being used as well. Ground crew would be working on them, where would they be walking, where would be damaged as far as just scuff marks and little things like that. Personally, I don't like to over-weather an aircraft. I know in service they can get really, really dirty, but at the same time, it's a piece of art. I'm creating a piece of art, that's the way I consider it, and a piece of history, so I'm not going to go nuts with the weathering on my aircraft.
Okay, so
personally.
We're talking about weathering. So for listeners out there who don't really understand what the definition of weathering is, what are we talking about when we're saying weathering?
Good question. it's basically if you started a kit and just painted it and didn't do weathering on it at all, it would look nice, but it would look like a model kit. What you're trying to create is a small, scaled-down version of the real item. How does it look in service if it was in warfare? How does it look in service as it was like it had been cleaned up and been worked on and things like that? So you're creating something that's a small, scaled-down version of the real thing.
So how is weathering different from filtering? What's the difference between the two?
Well, filtering is just changing the tonal values of your paint, whereas weathering is giving an item a used look.
A used look, so knocked around use every day.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Rather than shiny, everything's no scuffs or anything on it. Look, even the cleanest jumbo jets. You look at the undersurface of a clean jumbo jet, it's filthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And especially the World War II aircraft. Oh, and World War One, because the World War One aircraft had
Castor oil. Stuff went everywhere.
Yeah, it went everywhere. So those aircraft got quite dirty. And World War II aircraft, you look at the bottom of a World War II aircraft like a Messerschmitt, and they're filthy. There's oil going right down the underneath the engine area, right through the fuselage and right to the back, to the tip of the fuselage. Now, do you want to do that much weathering? It's up to you personally. But those aircraft got really, really dirty. I even did a P40 a couple of years ago, and that was used in Milne Bay. And I was putting mud on the wheels and underneath because those aircraft were landing in mud and in huge puddles. And it was so I was even adding that, which is I've never done that before. Usually it's just a very, very light coat of dirt over the tyres. So I don't like to put too much. But you've got to know where these things are being used.
Yes, exactly.
So with your weathering, you got I guess you got three sort of influences. You've got the paint being scuffed, worn, chipped in whatever variation that may be. You've got paint being faded.
Yes.
You've got stain marks as a result of lubricants, exhaust stains,
refueling,
weapon stains from guns firing. That's another point. And you got environmental influences on it as well, such as you were saying, in the case you might have dust or even mud on the actual kit, depending on what you're modelling and where it's...
Mould and mildew. Mould and mildew. Look at some of the Pacific campaigns when they got wet. Stuff got mouldy pretty quick.
Well, that's a good point because a lot of surfaces were still canvas covered, like the rudder and the ailerons in some aircraft. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So okay, and this is something that we've always banged on about, and Chris, you sort of reiterated on it, where you've got to actually have good references if you're sort of looking for something. So references are key. So you get your references all set up. And let's say you want to do I'll pick a nice subject matter, a Japanese fighter, and they're renowned for being heavily weathered and sort of chipped and everything. So how do you go about doing that? I mean, because when I look at it, there's two ways of doing it, and you can paint the underneath a silver of the aircraft, and then you put the paint on top of it and sort of chip it off by using different mediums and methods, in which we should talk about those mediums and methods as well. Or do you paint the aircraft the camouflage colour and then apply the chips on top of that? So which way would you go to sort of tackle that subject?
You can go both ways, and it comes down to your references as well, because some Japanese aircraft were delivered in the islands in silver. They were built in silver. The ailerons were painted, but the actual airframe was in silver, and they were delivered with this Hinamaru's on there and very basic after that. So when they landed, they basically got the ground crews that painted these aircraft. When they were painted in the field like that, most of the times they weren't painted underneath. It was purely just the top camouflage, and it was indigenous paints sometimes as well. Sometimes it was paints that had been brought over. So those particular aircraft got really chipped up. However, then you got other Japanese aircraft which were painted in the factory and then delivered, and they didn't chip up half as much, and they don't chip up as like the American aircraft as well. So you've got to do your references there and understand how, if you really want to get into it, and understand how these aircraft were delivered. Now, if I was going to do a Japanese aircraft really, really chipped up, and I have done that before, which was an aircraft that was in the field and painted indigenous colours, what I started with was knowing where the paint chips were going to go. Is I painted a paint or undercoat in silver, and then I patched that with some tape at that time. Nowadays, I'd probably use a masking fluid, and then paint the camouflage on top of that. Now, once the camouflage is then painted, you're really happy with how that result is finished. You then take away either the tape or the masking fluid, and you've been left with that chipped effect. Now, with that, you add to hand chipping. And there's two ways of doing that. You can either paint it with silver paint, say a Vallejo or a Warhammer or enamels with a small brush, and you could do it that way, or a silver pencil. You can even really do fine chips there as well. And I love the silver pencil. I've got one here today. They're beautiful doing little chips as well. So you work down from the very large chips from the very start, and then you go into the hand painting, and then you finish off with the smaller chips as well. The good thing about weathering aircraft is you can actually hide some imperfections of the aircraft. Once you start putting some paint on there, you can start saying, oh, I just didn't quite finish that seam. So you can put some chips next to it, and the eye seems to just glance across it. So you can actually hide little imperfections if you want to make a show winning kit. So it works well that way as well.
And you've built hundreds of aircraft in your time. How do you tackle the weathering side of it?
Well, pretty much the same as Chris does. But sometimes if I want to get like chips in an area close together, I'll use a sponge and just get a bit of the silver colour on the sponge and
just dab it on
there.
Yep.
I tend to usually go two-tonal chips lately. Get like a dark colour and then put a light colour in the centre of it, and that gives you more three-dimensional feel to the paint chip.
Yep.
Rather than actually chip the paint off itself.
Yeah, that shows an undercoat as well, because you have like, what's the light green that's?
The chromatic green. Yeah, which is good, like on US aircraft, and you put a bit of that down on, and then put your silver in between that.
Yep.
And it looks like it's actually, rather than just chipped, it's worn away.
Okay.
It's more of a worn look.
So can these methods be sort of transferred across to other genres, like cars, trucks, air, ships, armour?
Yep. Could all be it's all slightly different in a few places, but overall, it's you're using the same techniques.
And there's a range of different methods too, which, I mean, if you go to just type in weathering aircraft or weathering something in YouTube, and you're going to get a whole host of different sort of YouTube videos which will come up and show you the different methods.
Yep.
Chris, you were talking about masking before. Salt is another way of doing that, is it not, as well?
Yeah, salt masking.
Yep.
Ian's even tried Vegemite.
Yeah, I haven't tried Vegemite once.
Seriously?
Good old Vegemite. Work the treat. Work the treat. Vegemite and a sponge.
So you put Vegemite down in the kit with a sponge.
Yep. Painted the Panzer grey first, then put the Vegemite on where I wanted the chipping. Painted me Panzer brown, and then when the paint was nearly dry, just washed it under a warm tap.
When you're doing your chipping too, you don't just have an average chip over the whole aircraft.
No.
You've got to know where the chipping effect is being where it's being weathered. So leading edges is one area which it should be damaged up. Around the cockpit area where the crew are loading up weapons and things like that, especially ammunition. Say Hurricane. I know they had some fabric wings, but they had the little hatches were actually metal. They can be chipped up really nicely because the ground crew are trying to turn these aircraft around really, really quickly. So yes, they're being careful when they're loading up this ammunition, the ammunition, and it will hit the surface and then chip it up. So that's when you start looking at where you put your chipping as well. So don't put your chipping all over the whole aircraft. Look at where it's supposed to go. Make sure you don't put paint chips in fabric, of course, because paint seems to sit on fabric really nicely. So metal is a good place.
I tend to look for is areas which are going to be accessed at a regular interval on an aircraft, and they're the places where you're going to have your most chipping.
So access panels, which the guys are opening up all the time.
Exactly, like avionic bays and ammunition bays, hydraulics.
And on leading wings of edges, the paint chips predominantly around the closer to the fuselage and less towards the wingtips, because the way aircraft fly through the air is the air hits the main fuselage per se, and then gets pushed out over the wing, and that's where you start getting a lot of paint chips over it. So, the wing tips, you don't put many paint chips on there either. So that's you got to be careful about that.
So we've spoken a lot about paint chips there. What about other sort of weathering that you'd expect to appear in an aircraft, such as stains, be exhaust, oil, or smoke?
Yeah, well, you get your smoke through your gun barrels. I recently saw some real interesting footage of or photographs of B-25s, Mitchells, and they'd had recently had their gun packs removed. And where the actual blast from those 30 or 50 coals out on the gun packs on the side, it's actually back to bare metal.
Oh,
it's
seriously?
actually burnt the paint back to bare metal.
Wow.
So that's one thing you can look at. You also got your exhaust staining. I usually find German aircraft, I usually go a more blacker exhaust staining because of their inferior fuels compared to the Allies.
Synthetic fuels.
Yeah. As you said, oil stains, fuel stains, you can pop them on where someone's been a bit quick in pulling this nozzle out when they're refueling on the wing.
So what would you use to do your oil stains? What sort of medium?
Oil stains? I usually just use the AK oil and fuel stains.
Okay.
You can get in a bottle.
You can also spray that on as well. I've got it in guns. You can get the smoke in guns.
And oil.
And oil, yes. Yep. And you can also get similar paints in Tamiya range as well. And you can put that onto an airbrush and just very, very lightly airbrush over these areas. Low pressure. Make sure it's flowing out of the airbrush nicely, because you don't want splatters per se. You want it to come out nice and easy, and then paint it that way. With those particular paints, they're usually a gloss, so you're going to have to go over a matte as well.
Yeah.
But
you with the exhaust staining, you've got to look how badly certain aircraft left stains. Some aircraft there was hardly any staining from the exhaust, and then you got other aircraft like the good old AH1. Well, what is the SPAD?
SPAD, yeah, yep.
Those things look the side of the fuselage, just coated.
And then you got the Tornado from the English Tornado, which they use in Iraq.
Yeah.
And they've got the reverse thrusters, which sort of which is the afterburner. It sort of opens up, and then when they're coming into land for the short landing, it gets the whole back of the aircraft black.
Yeah,
It looks fantastic with this model.
Yeah. And also with a lot of exhaust staining, like I said, with the German stuff, I usually go very oily black consistency. You usually chuck a little bit of brown on the edges. Allies, I usually tend to go try and get a bit of grey, light grey in the middle of the exhaust staining, just to show the heat. That's important. The first time I ever did that was in a 72 scale Corsair, and I did black first, and then I got grey right in the middle, and just started coming out of it. It really lifted it. Yeah, really did lift it. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Fading of the paint. So when you look at an aircraft, I mean, and the thing that sort of jumps out at me straight away is some of the aircraft used during the Vietnam War by the Americans. Certainly the aircraft used by the Greek Air Force, and how they're extremely weathered. And it's not just the weathering, but it's almost like a fading of the paint. So if you can imagine the paint being exposed to direct sunlight over a period of time, it will sort of slowly fade. So how do you go about getting those techniques?
Some colours fade more than others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mattes fade very quickly. So thus matte paint.
Blues.
Yep.
Blues fade out really quick, and reds get brighter under sun, as the Australians found out during the beginning of the Second World War. So while the Australians dropped the red dot in the Randell.
Yes.
The red got brighter, the blue disappeared, and all the people on the ground thought it was a Japanese plane.
But going back to your question, weathering, I've got a MiG 29 sitting here. I know you listeners can't see it, but I've basically started weathering that whilst I was painting it because I did a pre-shade. And basically for pre-shade is I get black, because I work in acrylics, and I get it at low pressure on the airbrush, and I go around all the panel lines, the edges of the aircraft, around gun bays and any edges per se, and any panel lines. The plane looks a bit weird at the end because you've got the plastic, and then you've got this black, funny-looking lines all over the place. And then you let that sit, and then you start putting your paints, the colour on top of that. Mm-hmm. But when I paint an aircraft, I just don't paint it in like a car spray painter would spray a car by going from one end to the other. I would sort of build up individual panels per se. I might sort of cover over a whole wing and just get the colour even, but showing through the original pre-shade. And then I would build up areas with the airbrush. And it's a time-consuming process, but it really does look nice. And it's patchy, it looks nice. And once I've finished that with the all-over colour, say underneath camouflage or a single camouflage on top, when I start looking at the second colour or even the third colour for the camouflage, when you start putting that on, it gets rid of that pre-shade, which is a bit of a shame because you've got this really nice finish. But then I get the guns out again, the smoke. It's like a clear paint, and then I go over those panel lines again and then bring them back again, those darker areas. And that's how I keep those darker areas working. And then I might even add a different colour into that original camouflage as well, because if it's being used in the Middle East, those paints would fade a lot. So I would use a lighter colour and then start building up the middle of the panels. And if I'm feeling adventurous enough, I might even get a darker colour of that camouflage or the paint colour I'm using on the aircraft, and then build up the areas around the edges once more. So it's a developing process. It really is.
Mm. So the thing with pre-shading too, let everyone know, don't use textures. So many times you've seen people get the Sharpie out and they go, oh, I'll do it with a Sharpie. It looks fantastic. You put your paint on, looks good. A week later or 2 weeks later, the Sharpie comes through your paint.
I actually did that as an experiment. I had an A4, an Airfix one. I got super cheap, so I thought, I'll do that. I'll put the Sharpie on and I'll just see how bad it actually is. And it is bad. Yeah. Absolutely. It's shocking. Yeah. So you got pre-shading, or you can do post-shading.
And you can do both as well. Yeah, you can do... I do pre-shading and post-shading. And whilst doing the pre-shading and post-shading, like as I said before, I even put different colours in there as well.
And, of course, on top of that, we've got, when we're talking about aircraft, is the panel line fillers as well, which you can use to highlight the panel lines.
Yes, but you've got to be careful. Some people do every panel line, and you don't need to do every panel line. You only do the ones that are most, like ailerons, landing flaps, compartments that are open daily for inspection. You can probably get away with the odd panel line on those. Everything else, like 72 scale aircraft, I don't see why people even do panel washes on those things.
Mm.
You look at an aircraft in the distance that's going to be 172 scale, you're not going to see any panel lines.
Yeah, that's true. Mm. Mm. It is a personal preference on weathering.
Yeah, because a lot of people do it, so it brings out the detail.
Yeah, yeah. And I like to do mine over light hand, my weathering. That's my personal preference. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to go pretty average with my aircraft, but I usually go a little bit overboard with my armour.
Well, armour, I think you can quite happily go overboard with it because, you know, it's just the environment they operate in. They're going to be a lot dirtier than aircraft all the time.
Well, that's right, yeah. Too true.
Adding to that as well, you can also use pastels there's a technique I use as well, whereas I get some tape and I like to get with a lot of ailerons and flaps and so forth. And when you're sitting in a commercial jet and looking out in the wing, you can actually see a lot of grime coming out of these areas. So what I usually do is I like to get some tape. Make sure the tape, because you don't want to rip up the paint you've already got there, and make sure it's been sitting for, say, a week. So it's off-gassed, it's really, really dry. You can even, because I use Tamiya tape, I even sort of run it on my hand first and get the tackiness off, and then I just put it on there. You can even use Post-it notes, they work quite well, and just put it on the panel line. Now from that, you then get some pastels on a brush, and then brush over the tape or the Post-it note, and then brush back. And that gets like a grime coming out of these areas, out of these ailerons and these other areas like that, like air brakes and things like that, showing grime sort of coming out of there. And that works really nicely as well. Very, very simple technique.
I even saw on YouTube where a guy was demonstrating how he uses pencils.
Pencils.
He's painted the model up, and then just to go around and sort of weather the camouflage, he sort of chooses a different sort of shade of that particular colour and uses a pencil around the outline, and that seemed like quite a good method as well.
It all comes down to what you feel most comfortable with.
And experiment.
Yep.
Yeah, it does.
Just go and buy a cheap $10 kit and just use it as your experimental sort of model.
And being part of a club, or going to an exhibition where you see these the kits displayed, and then you see a kit that you actually like and the techniques used, and then approach the modeler and then ask them, how did you do that? And they'll explain. Most of them are happy to explain the technique they used, and you learn from that as well. So it's always good.
You never stop learning.
Never stop learning. All right, well, that just about wraps us up. We're just about out of time now. So, again, thanks very much, Chris, for coming along and imparting your expertise and knowledge and sharing it with the rest of us.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Ian.
No worries, mate.
That's it from us. Again, if you want to get in contact with us, either go along to our Facebook page or drop us an email at onthebench64@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
And we should get our crowdfunding started.
We should.
For my B36.
Oh, no, you can go talk to your bank manager about that.
Yeah.
Again, if you're listening to us on iTunes, please go along to the iTunes store and leave us a comment on there. The more people who actually go along and leave a comment, it just makes it easier for other people to find. Thank you to those of you who already have gone and left a comment. We've definitely taken on board your feedback, and we're working towards making this a podcast for you guys out there. So I think that's it from me. Until the next fortnight, I'll see you later, Ian.
See you, Dave.
And thanks very much, Chris. See you later, Chris.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Ian.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.